My name is Daniel Bourne. I'm a retired professor from the College of Worcester in English and Environmental Studies. And it's my pleasure to introduce Danae and her amazing vision into our backyards. Danae Wolfe is an award-winning conservation photographer, writer, and TEDx speaker, passionate about helping people see backyard bugs and wildlife in a new light. The creator behind the homegrown conservation initiative Chasing Bugs, which you can check out at chasingbugs.com. Wolfe inspires gardeners to appreciate the beauty of our natural world and embrace their role in its protection. Her new book, The Grass Isn't Greener, demonstrates how small changes in your yard or garden can create lasting impact for the planet. And I'm going to maybe pass out these books. If you want to take a look at the book itself, which is cooking. Over to you, Danae.
Thank you so much. Can you guys all hear me okay? With the microphone, I don't need to like yell or really project. Thank you for coming. This is like what I like to tell my audiences. This is the first step toward conservation, is coming and learning and just being open to education and outreach. I could talk to you for like the next 8 hours. I have, I think, 35 minutes total. So we have a lot to get through in a short period of time, but I really want this to be conversational, and I want to kind of gear the content toward what you are interested in. So my first question, I always love that start with this. How many of you like insects? Okay. It depends on the insect, right? How many of you don't like insects? Okay. One person is being truthful. Not that the rest of you are lying, but sometimes people they're like, oh, is she going to shame me if I say that I don't like bugs? And I don't like to shame people. In fact, the whole reason why I wrote Grass Isn't Greener was to give people a pragmatic outlook on how to garden for wildlife, because there's a lot of shame happening in this space right now. How many of you are on social media? I'm like chronically online, like chronically on social media. And what I noticed a couple of years ago, especially in Facebook groups about like pollinator gardening, is the narrative was shifting forward, which was good. Like, we're making progress, but almost too much progress. We were starting to tell people these very prescriptive ways of gardening for wildlife. You can only plant these types of plants that come from these specific areas. And if you don't do that, then you're doing more harm than good. And I was like, that's quite frankly a little bit of BS. Like, can you do like the best possible thing? Yes. Is that great? If you plant a native cultivar of purple coneflower, are you doing more harm than good? No, I don't abide by that prescriptive way of thinking. So that's kind of how Grass Isn't Greener was really born. This isn't working, but I'm right here, so we'll do this. So lawns look green, right? How many of you have some turf grass at home? And again, I'm not here to name and shame and be like, oh no, you have turf grass. How many of you have a little bit of turf grass? I mean, most of us do, right? Because it's kind of the norm. How many of you are kind of making progress toward getting rid of that turf grass? No. Exactly. All of it. Some of it, yes. We're in the exact same situation. I live here in Worcester. I'm a Worcester local. I live on Christmas Run with the pin oak trees that line the street. This time of year, sun up till sundown. What do I hear?
Leaf blower.
The leaf blower, constant. And our yard, by the way, is covered in a nice little carpet of oak leaves that our neighbors are like, when are you going to rake those up? And we're like, we're not going to rake those up. We have a bit of an obsession with turf grass. Where does that really come from? What's that? England. It really comes from England, right? It came over here from England. The idea kind of took off because we, in like the 1950s-ish, started to get some really good tools. Not only convenience in the kitchen by way of all of these things that allowed us to have like microwavable dinners and stuff, but we also had things like lawnmowers, which made lawn care more accessible to the average person. And it has been ingrained in us sociologically as well, and society. We think of lawns and we think of what? Status, right? So there is so much, I think, ingrained in lawn care and how we gravitate away from this. So I work for the Nature Conservancy professionally. Yes, I manage Chasing Bugs. I do a lot of writing and education and outreach, but I work in conservation professionally, and marketing and storytelling particularly. And it's dismal out there. The narrative around climate and loss of biodiversity is really, quite frankly, depressing. There's not a lot of hopeful narratives. This doesn't work. I don't know why I forgot that. You go away, because I will do that 20 more times if I don't get rid of that. We're experiencing massive declines in pretty much all major wildlife groups. I'm not going to just read these to you. I will kind of narrow in on a couple things, like 40% of insects and here's the context. 40% of insect groups that have been studied have been shown to be threatened or at risk of extinction. Now, what's the number of overall insect groups or insect species that have been studied? I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but how many different species of insects are out there in the world? Does anybody know? I hear a lot, about 1 million. About 1 million described species, and entomologists believe there could be 5 million, 10 million. I've even heard estimates that suggest up to 25 million species of insects out there in the world, which means there's a heck of a lot that we don't know. But what we do know is that 40% of those species that have been studied are in decline. And who gets all the attention? When we talk about who's being studied, I hear bees and monarchs. And not just any bees. What kind of bees? Honeybees, which are non-native here in North America. Are honeybees important? Yes, absolutely, especially from an agricultural standpoint. But they are, quite frankly, kind of livestock. They are important in an agricultural sense. When we talk about native bee conservation, we're really referring to the 500 species of bees that are native here in Ohio, the mason bees, the leafcutter bees, the sweat bees, all the little guys. So my area of specialization is insects. I really came to this work through the literal and metaphorical lens of photography and photographing flowers as a 12-year-old girl in my garden. Not very well. I was horrible, but I got better as time went on. And then I got my first macro lens when I was in college, studying environmental studies at Hiram College, not too far from here. And all of a sudden I was like, look at all these cool bugs on the flowers that I've spent the last 10 years photographing. And that's really what changed things for me. And I was like, bugs, I went my whole life hating all insects, especially spiders, like hating, like visceral hate of anything 6-legged, 8-legged, or many-legged. I'm looking at the centipedes, the house centipedes in particular. That has changed through photography because now I see their faces. And when you look at them from that perspective, it's like a whole new world. So I actually do a lot of public speaking on that, but it's not just about the insects. Yes, there's other critters. When you think about wildlife like pests in your garden, who comes to mind? Squirrel. There's so many squirrels. Do we have like a story about chipmunks? I see you like still shaking your head like those chipmunks. They're everywhere. Of course, they burrow. The moles, the voles, the bunnies, the deer, the raccoons, which are my personal favorite, opossums, skunks, all those things that quite frankly, I love so much. But most people are like, oh, we really hate these things. So we're kind of talking about what do wildlife need? This is going to be like the quickest crash course. We're going to kind of go through quickly. If you have questions, just tell me to shut up and I will stop talking and we'll have a conversation because I'm here for you. So what do wildlife need? The same thing that we need. Safety, places to raise their young, food, and water. Are we providing all of these things in our yards? Maybe for certain species. Who are we attracting? Oh, we love the monarchs. Look how pretty they are. Monarchs are great. I mean, they really are. But we often come up with singular solutions for singular species. You want monarchs, plant milkweed. Great. What about the other million species of insects out there? So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these things. How can we help from home? This one is going to seem like a duh moment. And when I was thinking about writing grasses and greener, I was like, do I even want to like get this basic and talk about understanding your land? And I thought we better, because for the people who are just getting into this, seems really fundamental, seems like an oversimplification. But when I moved to Christmas Run 10 years ago here in Worcester, who knows where Christmas Run is? Who was like driven down the street, you know, the oak trees. I was like, I want to plant a prairie garden in my front yard. Our whole street is lined with mature oak trees. So my front yard is mostly shade. And I was like, I gotta probably not do this unless I'm cutting down the oak trees, and I'm not cutting down the oak trees because they're a keystone species. Like they're important for a lot of wildlife here. So I kind of had to figure out, here's a photo of my backyard. We had drainage issues. I had to figure out my soil, the areas of sun and shade. Our previous homeowners that lived in our home planted a lot of invasive plants, not just like ornamental non-natives, but like the honeysuckles and the barberry and a big patch of bamboo that took 3 summers to get rid of. So lots of invasive species that we had to identify and eventually get rid of and then replace kind of systematically. So this is an aerial view of my street. You can see why a prairie garden in my front yard doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. Now we have planted a strip of about 500 square feet in our front yard where we get just enough. I don't even think my house is in this photo. I think it's like over here. Yeah, because that's my neighbors. So my house is like right here. We were able to plant like 500 square feet of native gardens, but there was a lot of learning that I had to do to understand like what's the landscape. Now, one of my favorite things that I have done is installed a trail cam in my yard, and not just one trail cam, but a variety of bird feeder cameras and trail cams, because you might be surprised at who's actually coming through your yard. I had a company reach out to me on TikTok a number of years ago, and they're like, we want to send you a bird feeder camera if you are willing to make a video and post it on TikTok and promote us. And I was like, yeah, sure. And, I thought I would get a lot of really cool birds. I'm not a birder, I'm a bugger. I like to tell people that's not a thing, but I'm making it a thing. So if you go out into the world afterwards, bugging, make it catch on, please. People talk about bird watching and birding, but bugging needs to catch on too. So here's what I thought we were gonna get, and here's what we got, right? Like cute little birds. And then the first night I had this camera installed. Can anybody like tell what that is?
Okay, yes, a deer.
It's a deer.
Oh.
So it's kind of like this weird fisheye lens. I like to think it almost looks like a weird like undersea like creature. Now who do you think made this happen? I know that was a weird way of asking that question. These guys. Little raccoon stopped by, crawled on top of the bird feeder, and you can hear this happening. It was off camera because he was literally on top of the bird feeder, but he crawled up here and he knocked the camera off, and the whole thing is filmed, right? So you can see the camera like tumbling to the ground, the bird seed scatters everywhere. The perch, there was a perch here, broke in half, and then a few minutes later, you see this little sneaky raccoon coming up very timidly, and like looking at the seed, and then a few minutes later, it's just video after video after video of just like this raccoon gorging herself on all this bird seed laying on the ground. And then it was the skunks, and then it was the opossums, and we've had flying squirrels sitting in the feeder and eating. And I have literally hundreds of hours of this. And I was like, I didn't even know that this was happening. I didn't know, like we haven't seen raccoons. Raccoons are one of my favorite animals, by the way. We have counted in like a 2 to 3 week period, we counted 11 different skunks come through. Now I'm not good at like skunk ID, but we could see which ones they were by the white stripe along their back. So we had like, oh, this one is the big white stripe, and this one is the funky stripe, and this one's the no stripe at all. 11 different skunks come through. Now some of you might be thinking, I don't want that in my yard. I don't want the skunks and the opossums. I want the monarchs, and I want the honeybees, and I want like the cute things that I like. It's a balance, right? All of these creatures have lived on this land for millennia, and we have very deliberately kind of pushed them to the outskirts, so much so that things like wolves no longer in Ohio. So who do we have a problem with? What'd you say? Coyotes. Yes, coyotes are actually non-native, which is not something that I knew. But now who do we have a really big problem with? Because they have no predators. If you're saying people, yes. But deer, right? We don't have natural predators for deer anymore. And when we do see stories of coyotes coming into suburban neighborhoods or bobcats, I'm like cheering. I'm like, yes, look at these animals. But people are like, no, keep them away from my family because they're going to eat my babies or my dogs more often. So these are all big problems. And again, we've created ecological imbalance in pursuit of this sort of garden aesthetic. Like we as humans really like this. Anybody know what species this is?
Honeysuckle.
Honeysuckle. I hear some like grunting and laughs. Oh, the birds love honeysuckle, right? And this is what I hear from gardeners all the time. Oh, but the birds love it. The birds do love it. They spread it, and it's like fast food for them. So yes, they love it, but it is not good for them. It's not the best, especially for our migratory species. They need those fats. They need the proteins from native berries and food sources. They're not getting that. So we're feeding them fast food, but to our human lens, especially some of our uneducated human lens, we're like, oh, but the birds love it. So it's great. I'm not going to get rid of it. So we have to be able to identify what are we planting? What do we need to get rid of? How many of you have Bradford pear in your neighborhood? How many of you have Bradford pear on your property? Again, this is not like a name and shame. These were planted everywhere. And they were originally planted as a sterile variety. And what happened? They had very weak branching structure. We ended up getting rid of them, or not even getting rid of them, but in our pursuit to create a better pear, we introduced a new cultivar that could now crossbreed with the original one that was meant to be sterile, and now it can produce fruit. And now you drive down 71 in May into like Columbus, what do you see? It's just acres and acres and acres of calorie pear. Burning bush. How many of you guys knew burning bush was invasive? Oh, but I'm not seeing it spread on my property. That's because you're mowing. So it never gets a chance to take off. But if you go to like the forest next door, guess what you see? Full understory. and mid-story filled with burning bush, privet, barberry, Norway maple, autumn olive, Dame's rocket, beautiful. Kind of looks a little bit like phlox. And Dame's rocket comes a lot in like wildflower mixes, sometimes even in wildflower mixes that are said to be native. So you really got to be careful with what you're looking out for. Any other invasives that you guys have that you're battling in your own landscapes? Garlic mustard. These are sort of the ones that we intentionally plant because they're pretty. Garlic mustard, of course, is a really bad one, especially for like lowland forest areas.
Not in our yard, but Phragmites.
Phragmites is really bad.
Yeah.
If you go into like Cuyahoga Valley National Park, any wetland areas, it's like one of those wet species, and it's almost indistinguishable from the native Phragmites. I think they have to do like genetic analysis to actually see, again, because we're changing the landscape. We're bringing these species here. They're crossbreeding, and they're taking over. Purple loosestrife, was that on the list? I can't remember. Lesser celandine is really bad too. Like the list goes on and on. Now, Ohio did add, oh my gosh, I don't even know the exact number, but they added like dozens of species in the Ohio Revised Code. Like these are now illegal to propagate and sell. Interestingly, Bradford Pear, they were like, we're going to give this one a couple years before we actually make it illegal because we're going to give the landscapers time to come up with an alternative. So again, it's because this is what people want. They're pretty, but we are like really impacting wildlife in our pursuit of this like pretty garden. So what do we want to do? We want to ultimately lessen the lawn and we want to get native plants back in the landscape. Now, how many of you have seen this? The USDA Plant Hardiness Zone Map. What does this tell us?
What's hardy in our area?
What's hardy in our area? Like what can survive the climate of our area? And it's basically cold hardiness, right? What does it not tell us? Notice how these areas like that we are in, predominantly green, also way up in the Pacific Northwest. Again, it's just climate survivability. It's not telling us what plants are going to be great for the ecosystem or wildlife. So this is where ecoregion maps can help. This is an ecoregion map. It's a level 2 or tier 2 map. I think there's 4 total tiers and they get more granular as you get higher in number. I like the tier 2 map. You'll notice Ohio is kind of divided into 3 primary sections, and then there's this little itty bitty section down here as well. That's kind of way down where like Edge of Appalachia Preserve is. That may be a little bit east, but this is basically kind of shows us the similar characteristics in topography, landscape, climate, species makeup. So what is this? Yeah, it's the Appalachian Mountain Range, right? And you'll notice like what we have similar, like here's the plain states. This will tell us what plants we should be planting. Our ecoregion, and yes, you can use the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone map, but ecoregions are kind of your guiding light when it comes to species identification for which plants to include in your landscape. These are my 3 favorite resources. Pollinator Partnership, you can go online, put in your zip code, it will spit out exactly which ecoregion you're in and give you a fantastic plant list that includes flowers, vines, shrubs, trees, grasses, and what they support. Xerces is great, and National Wildlife Federation is also great. If you're like, that's too much work for me, I have a bit of a kind of a cheat sheet. These are like keystone species that you can plant that are really wonderful. I mentioned I love our pin oak trees in our yard. I love our pin oaks because they are one of the highest supporters of lepidopteran species. Now, who are lepidopterans? Butterflies and moths. Why do we care about butterflies and moths?
They feed everything.
They feed everything else. Yes, we care about those monarchs because they're so pretty. Moths, way more biodiverse, like by a large margin. Who's this? Other than like the cutest moth ever, it's the Luna moth, right? That is a male Luna moth. Notice the very plumose, feathery antenna, and look at that face. He's cute. He's out there looking for a lady. He's using those big antenna to capture all those pheromones that the ladies are sending off. By the way, how many of you have been to Mothapalooza in Southern Ohio? I've mentioned it to a couple people that came by the table. Huge moth event that happens in Southern Ohio every July. It's called Mothapalooza. If you're interested in learning more about moths, I highly recommend you go. It's like 3 days of education and outreach and then mothing. Like they actually put up moth sheets and you can go and find these guys and photograph them. It's so cool. So oaks, cherries, which are prunus, birch, maples, great for supporting caterpillars. We also have some keystone flowers, our goldenrods, our asters, our sunflowers, our black-eyed Susans, all wonderful. Do you only want to plant these? Like they're keystones, so they're a good place to start. But again, you don't want a monoculture of anything. You don't want to just be planting one thing. So definitely include a variety of form, structure, flowers, etc. Oh my gosh, the monarch again. Why does she keep talking about the monarch? It's not that I hate them. It's really not. Like monarchs are wonderful. They're beautiful, but they have become a poster child of insect conservation. And because of that, we are creating singular solutions for singular species. How many articles have I seen if you just search milkweed pest on Google, like noting how to get rid of milkweed bugs, milkweed beetles, milkweed tussock moths, all native, all host on milkweed. And we have all these articles that say, well, here's how to kill all these other bugs, because I didn't plant the milkweed for these other guys. I planted it for the monarch. Research shows that when you have a milkweed plant with a diversity of arthropod or insect life and spiders and other things, the survivability of monarch larvae, the caterpillars, increases. Because if you're a bird and you're flying over a monarch plant that has a bunch of bugs on it, including a monarch caterpillar, you have a buffet of options to choose from. If you're a bird and you're flying over a milkweed plant that has just one big juicy monarch caterpillar, who are you going to eat? The one option, right? So it makes sense. We don't want our milkweed plants to just have one thing. That said, all of my milkweed, not all, the 2 flowering milkweed plants in my garden were completely, I was going to say decimated, but that's the wrong word. Eaten, provided meals for, nothing other than milkweed tussock moths, which are native. They're great, right? It's still a caterpillar. It's still feeding birds and other things. That's why you need enough milkweed and other plants to support a diversity of species in your garden. So I've kind of already mentioned this. Are nativars good or bad? What is a nativar? Native plant that was bred for certain, mostly human characteristics. Oh, I want my purple coneflower to be orange or white, or I want that shrub to have purple leaves instead of green leaves. The answer really is it depends. Okay, if you are planting something like an orange coneflower, it might be a little bit less attractive to pollinators. If you're planting something like leaf color changes, like from green to purple, it might be less palatable to things like caterpillars because it just tastes different, right? You're creating different like chemicals in those leaves. So the answer is it really depends. But if you want to plant that like purple coneflower or purple powwow coneflower, that's still a really good step in the right direction. And a lot of our cultivars have more desirable characteristics, like they stay shorter. You know, you might not be having like these super, super tall plants that are going to get you a fine from your city because your neighbors hate you. That said, if you are looking at plant tags and it says like disease resistant, pest resistant, what does that mean? It's not part of the ecosystem. Nothing's eating it. It's not part of the ecosystem. So that's kind of a good, I think, code word. Now, what if you don't want to let go of grass entirely? Some of you noted like you have turf grass. We have, you guys have seen our yard. It's not turf grass. It's a lawn, but it's mostly broadleaf weeds, and it's a lot of moss because we have so much shade. It's a lot of wild blue violets that come up. It's a lot of dandelions, which our neighbors really like. That was sarcasm. We also have pine trees, so we also get a lot of pine needles, and of course the oak trees drop a lot of leaves. So you can get a little bit lazy this time of year. You can leave those leaves. Studies have shown that if you mow your lawn every 2 weeks, you support higher bee abundance. You're going to get more bees. Why? Because you probably have some floral resources coming up, like the dandelions, like the clover, like the wild blue violets, and other things. Again, you could be risking your neighborhood, like your neighbor relationships if you do that, but it's worth it to me. Who's this? It's a little sweaty. On a dandelion, by the way, non-native, but look at the like power of pollination here on this bee. So that's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about bee biology. We're not going to focus in on honeybees again because they're non-native. We're going to kind of focus in on our native bees. 90% of bees are solitary. They're not like honeybees or bumblebees that nest in colonies. They nest usually in the ground or in cavities. In fact, 70% are ground nesters. This is why a lot of people are like, oh, I got stung because I like stepped over like a bee nest. Most of these, because they're solitary, just like wasps, 99% of our wasps are also solitary. They're not aggressive. The aggressive ones tend to be things like our paper wasps because they nest in a nest. They're protecting a whole colony, but our solitary ones tend to not be aggressive at all. This is a little cellophane bee. She's building a nest in sandy soil in the ground. So again, we have to kind of increase our tolerance for like where these things are. You don't want to plant grass in every single area of your landscape. Like growing up, if we had a single patch of like bare in our yard, my dad would thought like throwing grass seed on it. And that really prevents things like bees from nesting. Now, you don't want this in areas where your children are playing or your dogs are walking or you're gardening or whatever. But if it's sort of like tucked away in a corner of your yard, let those bees nest there because we need them. This is also a really great time of year to think about holding off on garden cleanup. How many of you go out? I see like some giggles. How many of you guys go out and like deadhead every last thing and like remove all the stems and because they're unsightly, right? They're brown, they're gross, they're dead. They serve no purpose. How many of you are willing to admit that that's how you garden? Yeah, and this is the norm. This is what we've been taught to do, right? Because it's not pretty to leave all those brown dead stems. Who needs the brown dead stems? Remember, 90% of our bees are solitary nesting. 30% nest in cavities like stems. So if you leave them, anything that's like in your garden right now, leave it to overwinter. In the spring, you can go and start to cut those stems. You want to leave them at heights of like 8 to 18 or 24 inches. And then female bees will begin to build nests in there. The bees, depending on the species, they will overwinter. They will be eggs, they will hatch, they will be larvae for a while, they will pupate, and then they will overwinter as pupa in the stems. And then the following spring, so this is year 3, this year's plants become next year's nests for the following year's bees. So this is now year 3, all of those baby bees will come out of those stems. What happens if they like fall over? You know, because like it rained a lot or snowed a lot, that's fine. What happens if you're like, I really can't have these ugly stems in my garden? Cut them down now, this time of year, bundle them up and put them someplace in your yard. The bees can still use them that way. We talked a little bit about leaving the leaves already. We only have, I told you I could like talk for 8 hours on this topic. We only have like 9 minutes left. And I want to get through a bunch of other stuff. Leave the leaves, the end. I know that not everybody is in a situation to do that. Like my neighbors have an expectation, like in my neighborhood, that you're gonna mow, you're gonna blow, you're gonna pick up your leaves. Hey, why aren't you raking yet? We're not raking yet because for some really good reasons. We want to go back to the caterpillar. Remember I said moths are so much cooler than butterflies? That's a little bit of a bias. The reality is we have 140 species of butterflies here in Ohio. We have more than 3,000 species of moths, and who eats all of them? Especially in like caterpillar form, it's the birds as like full grown adults. A lot of times it's bats, still birds. Doug Tallamy, who knows Doug Tallamy? Amazing, amazing researcher, sort of like the father of like homegrown conservation. Pair of chickadees he found will feed a clutch of young 350 to 570 caterpillars every single day. How the heck do they do it? I don't know. So it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise just one single clutch of one family of chickadees. So think about all the caterpillars that are out there. Who knows what these are? I'll tell you in just a second. But before I do, it's kind of important to understand the life cycle of a lot of these moths. Eggs are usually laid in the tippy tops of trees. The very hungry caterpillar hatches like in the light of the moon, right? The pop out comes, we're like at a book fair. This is like basic stuff here. In the light of the moon, a little egg is laid on a leaf. Of course, that's talking about a butterfly, but it goes for a moth too. The very hungry caterpillar eats chocolate cake and sausages and everything that it eats. In this case, this is a sycamore leaf. And then what? What do moths and butterflies do? They pupate, they build a chrysalis, right? In the case of most of our moths, they will actually come down from the canopy of the tree, beneath the canopy of the tree, and they pupate in the soil beneath the tree or in the leaf litter. Most of our suburban landscapes, they don't have leaf litter or healthy soil. They have hard, compacted turf grass, which means they cannot complete their life cycle where it was started. Those caterpillars are the baby of this guy. This is the Io moth, like the coolest moth ever. So what can you do a little bit differently? Well, if you can't just leave your leaves where they fall, this is an aerial view of my home landscape taken a couple of years ago. It looks different now because this has become a big pollinator garden. It's like the one strip of area that receives just enough sunlight. We have created these dedicated beds under the canopy of our oak trees. And we try to, if our neighbors are like getting nitpicky with us, we will rake all of our leaves in there. Last year, we just let them lie on the grass, but we do kind of rake them in these beds under the canopy of the oak tree because, again, we're giving those caterpillars, among a plethora of other wildlife, the ability to overwinter and complete their life cycle where it began. So it's really important. A lot of people ask me, can I mulch the leaves? Can I run them over with a lawnmower and just leave them in the turf grass because it won't kill my grass? Yeah, you can, What's going to happen though to anything overwintering? You're going to chop it up. So that could include fireflies. It could include the Luna moth, which overwinters in leaf litter, like builds their cocoons out of leaves. It could include, who knows, like mice and spiders and everything else. So it depends on what your goals are, right? I'm a pragmatic. So the best solution, leave them where they lie, leave them where they fall. The next best, do what we do, kind of break them into dedicated garden beds, let them decompose naturally. If you are in a situation where you're like, I really, like maybe I'm in an HOA, I have to get rid of them entirely, I don't want to, maybe think about mulching them and letting them go back into the soil. You're still improving the soil structure. You might not be providing the best possible habitat for wildlife though. So there are some trade-offs. I do want to leave time for questions, so I'm gonna, there's so much more in the book, and what an awful sales pitch, like buy the book if you want to learn more. I was hoping to get through a lot more, but we'll talk about one final thing, and that's how to help fireflies. How many of you hate fireflies? Oh, this is a name and shame. I was gonna say, if anybody raises their hand, like, why? How can you hate a firefly? I've never come across somebody who's like, yeah, man, I really don't like fireflies. They're just icky insects. Fireflies are awesome. They're, I think, also kind of a poster child of conservation. If you're on social media, you probably saw tons of stories this past summer of like, we're the last generation to see fireflies. What's the truth in that? There are some species that are actually declining. Yes, they're usually species that are endemic or native to very narrow ranges of habitat. There's like a, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a species of firefly that's endemic to like the salt marshes in Florida, right? Very, very narrow range of habitat. The eastern common firefly, which is what we see at dusk in our backyards, that's really common, and it's not been shown to be in active decline at all. A lot of people though are like, well, I'm not seeing fireflies in my own backyard. And I ask them, well, how are you stewarding your landscape? Well, I'm applying fertilizers, pesticides. I'm trying to get rid of the slugs and the snails because I don't like them. I don't have a water source. You know, I have all non-native plants. I mow my grass every 3 days. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why you're not seeing fireflies, right? Like fireflies usually have a 2-year life cycle. Most of that time, they're living in the soil or leaf litter or in rotting logs. And then they pupate, and then they live for like an abysmal couple weeks as like an adult. That's their flashy stage. But they don't live long as adults. If we are not supporting them in that 2-year period where they're living in the soil, then we are not going to be seeing them or supporting them in our own backyard. So what can you do? Leave some of your grass to grow a little bit taller, because the females, they kind of get a little lazy, I'm not gonna lie. They tend to hang out in the taller grasses in like moist areas. They let the males do all the work. The males are the ones that we tend to see. I see someone that's like, yeah, it's typical. They're the ones like floating through the sky. The females will hang out in the grasses. They'll flash. These are for our flashing species, not all flash as adults. The females flash. They're like, ooh, flash, flash, flash. And then the males are like, ooh, I like value the way you're flashing. And then he'll kind of come in and they, of course, do their thing. That's great. Now, as an aside, there is one species. They're the femme fatale fireflies. Have you guys heard of femme fatales? Yeah, he's like, I know what a femme fatale is. The femme fatale fireflies, they've learned to mimic the flash patterns of other species. They're female, so they'll hang out in the grasses. They mimic the flash patterns of another species. They call in the male and then they eat him. And you're like, yeah, that tracks. That tracks. Why do they do this? Oh, because nature is really hard, right? No, they actually do it for a specific reason. Those species of fireflies that they're eating have, I'm going to get the name wrong, lucibuphigins. I know that sounds awful. Lucibuphigins? I think that's actually right. People are like, I don't know, it sounds right, so go with it. We'll go with it. Lucibuphigins. It's probably not, but it's something like that. It's a chemical in those fireflies that makes them less palatable to jumping spiders. So it's a defense mechanism so that they are not eaten, thank you. So they are not eaten by jumping spiders. So by eating another species of firefly that has that chemical in their body, it makes them less palatable to jumping spiders. Like, how cool is nature, right? So let a little bit of your grasses grow taller. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. You can just choose some areas of your landscape to do that. Pesticide-free yards is huge because if we're getting rid of their prey, things like the slugs and the snails that we tend to hate because they eat our plants that we love, but those are needed as prey items for things like fireflies. Water sources are also fantastic. And then I kind of already mentioned the prey items here. I'm at 1 minute left, so I didn't leave much time for questions. However, I'm going to be here till 4 back in the corner. So if you have questions, please come find me. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here and just taking that first step to like learning about gardening for wildlife.
Good job.